question for you so that I can really get a pulse of people in the room. So the question is that, do you prefer to see the big picture or are you a detailed person? No right or wrong answers. I just need to see the mindset in the room. I've got about 8 responses so far. We will stop at some point because I assume that not everybody will be able to answer. So that's nice. So we got about 14, 15. The house is tilted towards big picture and some detail. Okay, now this getting closer. The house is divided now, 10 and 9. Okay, we got about 20 responses. Let's see a few more. Okay, suddenly the big picture guys are lagging and the details is emerging. So it looks like those who respond fast are the big picture guys, and those who are in detail are still reading it. Okay, I've got about 23 responses. Let me get a few more and then we'll switch to the next question. All right, so I think everybody have got the hang. It's www.menti.com and the code is 325157. Okay, so I think the house is a bit divided. So I think I see it's about 30 people, 16, 14 about. Okay, let's look at the next question. What do you like? Do you like speed or do you like perfection? And I know these are the trade-offs. You can't have everything. Okay, that's lovely. So lots of perfection. All right. Okay. Nobody likes speed, but likes perfection. Okay, 1 to 34. Okay, lovely. I think we got about a few more and then I'll switch. So it's this class is all about perfection. All right, okay. Okay, they get to the next one. The next question is, do you like mathematics or do you like physics? Physics. Okay, right. All of these questions are actually profiling you. So just in case you thought that I'm just doing this, just killing time by asking you this stupid question, they are actually profiling you in terms of what the mindset is. All right, okay, that's good. So about 25, 18. Okay, just to give you, I'll give you a little perspective once I finish these questions. What is important to you? How something is done or how to get it done? I know again, trade-off, you would say that I want to both, but let's hear. I'm sure some of you watched this program on Discovery called How Do They Do It? That's about how it is done, and how to get it done is, all right. Okay, that's interesting, 34-6. Okay, and thank you so much for playing so well with me. Last question, this is a text, you got to type it. I've got no choices for you. What drives you the most? What attribute? And write in one word or maybe just two. I don't need long sentences. What is one thing which drives you the most? What makes you wake up from the bed every day and say, let's get going today. Today is a special day. What are your motivation? Maybe what drives you the most? Is it money? Is it knowledge? Is it experience? Is it something new? Is it maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend? Maybe it's something else, so whatever. Okay, my aim, that's goal. Okay, all right. Let me just hide the result. I don't, you're not going to see anybody else's results till I actually show it to you. Okay, so I got about 10 responses. Okay, got 12, some more. We had about 40 responses to the objective type questions. It's when it comes to writing the essays, we have the dropouts. So 21, that's good. Okay, let's see the results. Right, okay, so it's money, experience, knowledge. These would mean bigger, which means there are more words for that. Love and affection, challenge, study, respect, time, dream, professor. Oh, professor drives. I didn't ask you that who drives you out. I said that what drives you. So I'm sure the professors drive you out. Okay, all right. So I got 37 responses. I think that's good. More keep coming. That's really helpful. But I think that serves my purpose. I got what is. So one thing I will tell you, some analysis from the responses which you got, and then we'll go into the slides of what I came to present here today, is money drives some of you, which is a good news, because at least you know what you're driving for. And I belong to the capitalist side of the world, and my wife belongs to the socialist side of the world. So I do all these sins and make money, and she does all the good work and wipes out all my sins because she works for a foundation and not for profit. So we kind of do our balance sheet together. But I think it's a good idea. There's no harm for money to be driving you. But if money can drive you to do wrong things, that's a bad idea. So making money legitimately is the best thing to do. And it's important to have some purpose. I think the knowledge and experience coming even better, that's really a good idea. If I were to go back and look at some of this analysis out here, so I'll come to the last question later, is I like this one because the class is divided. There are some people who like to say, what's the big picture, and I'll get to the detail. There are some who start with detail and get out of the big picture. That's like a normal distribution, which looks good. This is a little bit disappointing to me. Let me just tell you what, because this tells me that you may not be truly wired for the real world. Because many of you would have learned, okay, somebody likes to do this thing, I will decline. All right, so you don't write. That's my class, I control it. Okay. The world is about being agile. I don't think the world is about being perfect, because perfection is the enemy of good. I'm sure one need to be perfect, but the amount of time it's going to take you to become perfect, you'll be done. So the world of today is not about getting the perfect answer. The world of today is continuing to do. So progress over perfection is actually far more important virtue than being perfect. You can actually never be perfect. So I think I would like to work on a little bit about the mindset question, saying, don't aim for perfection. I think you should aim for good. The concept of prototyping, the concept of doing something. Now, let me just tell you, the world of perfection was yesterday. When we used to build software, which used to take 10 years to build and 5 years to deploy. Today, when you do a mobile app, it takes about 45 days for a new app to be released. Imagine you downloaded a Facebook app and Facebook said that now we will do the next release, the next version, and the next features for you after 2 years, because that's when we'll reach perfection. I don't think you'll like that. So the world of today is hardly about perfection. I didn't mean about bad quality, but I think I mean about speed is far more important than perfection. Speed at the cost of quality, no, but the speed at the cost of perfection, absolutely yes. So I think it's a little bit of mindset you will, when you get into the corporate life, you got to look at it here. I'll talk about the next one. I gave this thing, I know it's subconscious mind, which picks up some of these things. So people who deal with physics are real world people. People who deal with mathematics are not so real world people. I know there are some mathematics professors out here. I'm not disrespecting, I'm not disappointing to you, but it's about, are you solving? Gravitational is a real world thing. Algebra is a manifestation of how do you get to that. So I think it's a good divided house. I like it because I think it's good that I see, but I would have liked to see this from an MBA class rather than from a BTech class. So the BTech class, I think I would have liked to see a little bit of how it is done is equally important, because you possibly can't get it done unless you know how it is done. So those people, and there are some nuances about, can you manage a hospital without being a doctor? Things are changing now, but there's a bit of, I think, an interesting perspectives out here. I wanted this response, what your favorite ice cream is, and most people say it's chocolate. A few said butterscotch, vanilla, mango. Nobody likes coffee, mint, or strawberry, but that's fine. All right, thank you so much for this nice update. I will now go down to actually share my presentation. So let me just stop sharing this one, and I will share something else now. Okay, so, but if you have any questions till that time, just make sure that you feed it in. Okay, let me just get the right screen. I'll stop sharing first so that otherwise it's going two things. So and now I will share my slides. Just a quick check. Are you able to see my slides in full screen mode?
Yes, sir.
Okay, lovely. All right. Okay. So I want to talk to you about a few things. Let me start with the phrase FOMO. I'm sure most of you are familiar. FOMO stands for fear of missing out. And this is a fear most humans have, because we are designed to say that, how can I not be in it? How can I miss it? It's like about the phrase you may have heard of, I want to have the cake and eat it too. So the fear of missing out is a syndrome or a fear which runs in our mind, which basically says that, how can I be missed out? I want to attend that party. I want to top the class. I want to be the best person making money. And I want to also have the best boyfriend and girlfriend. So this whole concept of doing everything, being everywhere, being at all times is actually the enemy of being anywhere because you possibly can kind of not live in the present. So let me start with the basic concept of opportunity cost. So there are lots of things which led to you can create a lot of things and you can consume a lot of things. There are limitations. I'm sure economics has taught us that there are limitations about resources. Resources are always scarce. So you got to prioritize. And if there's one resource which is certainly the scarce for everybody or is limited for everybody, is time. So how do you manage your time is going to be the biggest capability which you can learn. And the more you learn, the sooner you learn, the better it will become for you as you grow further in life. I sat in your classes maybe about 25 years ago, so I have a little bit of, I should say, the benefit of hindsight, and that might give some advantages, but I don't think I know all the answers. So when I say some of these things, these are some of these perspectives which I've learned from my time. So clearly, one of the big choices which you'll have to make is that what do you do with a certain thing? So life is all about making choices. And unfortunately, life does not have certainty of outcomes. Irrespective, and I'm sure some of you may have visited and consulted astrologers in your life, there is nobody on earth who can actually tell you how your life will unfold. You can potentially make certain choices which could potentially depict certain changes in the trajectory which you go, but there is no way you can predict or you can control your life completely. But the choices which you make will actually make you either happy or sad about some of those things. I give you another example because most of you are from engineering students. The game of chess, which is rather simple, it's got 8 by 8, 64 checkerboard. Now, if I were to ask you that, how many choices are there when you have to open a chessboard? And potentially, most of you would know that the number of choices you can open a chessboard with is 20. But once you open the chessboard and you are in the second move, how many choices do you have? Possibly many more. By the time you're on the fourth or the fifth move on a chessboard, the number of choices turn into billions. So you can make billion choices. And I must tell you that life is even more complex than the game of chess. Actually, life is like the game of snooker or a billiards or a pool, as some of you may know. Because in the game of chess, you can only make certain rule-based moves. But in game of life, you can make many, many different moves. So I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about, what certain choices and moves that you make. And in other words, how do you manage the opportunity cost? The cost of not doing something, the cost of an alternative which you did not take. So some of you may think, I wish I could have gone to a medical college. You can't evaluate that option because you can't go to, you can only make one choice. It's not about a simulation game anymore. It's about the choice which you make and what the outcome does it deliver. So the cost of next best alternative is lost when a choice is missed and you will never get to that. Let me just get into, I'll skip this slide in the interest of time. Let me just come to what some of the perspectives I wanted to share with you here today. And again, these perspectives are based on a corporate life. So some of you may choose to have a different life. Some of you may get an academician. Some of you may like to do a researcher. Some of you may, I'm not talking about those because I'm none. When I made the choice, I lost those alternatives. So I lost the alternative to be a professor. I lost the alternative to be a researcher. I lost the alternative to be somebody else. I became a corporate citizen. And therefore, I'm going to talk to you about the corporate life. So before I go into that thing, I want to give you the one single thing which is called the digital effect. Now, some of you who watch Netflix or others would have heard of this show called The Queen's Gambit. But let me give you a little bit of history. The Queen's Gambit was a book. It's a fiction book which was launched in 1983. So the author at that point in time, which is Walter Travis, wrote a book which is a very nice novel about the game of chess, a lady who plays chess very nice, called Queen's Gambit. And that book did okay. I don't think it did great in 1983, the March of 1983. And now I'm going to take you now. What happened about 37 years later, and now we see Queen's Gambit, the novel has been turned into a Netflix series. And what happens? And these are the data as of October 2020. October 2020, Netflix released Queen's Gambit in a video format. So the same book turned into a movie or a web series. And this due date might be dated because it's a December statistics. By the end of December, almost 62 million households, not 62 million people, 62 million households, because one TV screen is seen by many people, had watched the show. The inquiries of chessboard went up by 250% just on eBay. How to play chess, a search phrase, went up all-time high in 9 years. And the original novel, the novel which was created 37 years ago by Walter Travis, became a New York Times bestseller. It wasn't a New York Times bestseller then. And the number of players on chess.com, which is actually a site where you can play chess online, which makes revenue by making people play chess, has gone up 5x. So the point I'm trying to make is that the digital effect of our world is unparalleled. So what happened in the physical world may have had one trajectory, but what is happening in the digital world? And I'm telling you, it is impossible for us to fully predict where this will go, but it'll certainly go somewhere which it hasn't gone before. So the impact, the physical world had direct cause and effect, and that's what the causal analysis, the fishbone diagram, and all that we'll learn in the class. But the digital world is nowhere close to what is taught in the physical world because it's very different. We are trying to understand, we haven't understood. So again, coming back to my point is speed versus perfection. I think the speed is going to see an unparalleled dimension compared to what we have seen before. I hope someday we are able to travel faster than the speed of light, and Einstein will be turning in his grave, and some of the professors will hate me when I say it. I hope we will not, because the law of physics will limit us. But I think the speed of human actions, the speed of human mind, the speed of human desire is just going through the roof. And the impact of that is not unidimensional, it is multidimensional. So let me just get into some of the perspectives I have. Many of you would have seen this chart. It's a chart prepared by Dunning-Kruger, the two research scientists, and it's something which I love all the time when I think something else. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Let me take a minute to explain it. This is a chart which plots on the x-axis as the wisdom grows, what is the effect of that wisdom on individuals' confidence? It is a super generalized topic.
कौन-कौन
Sorry, is that a question?
निकालो ना इंटीग्रल.
Right. Are you able to hear me? Okay. All right. Okay. So the Dunning-Kruger effect basically says that as an individual starts to gain knowledge, what happens to their confidence? So this is the point when you know nothing. So at this point in time, you have zero knowledge. And when you have zero knowledge, you have zero confidence. But imagine you sit through the first class of thermodynamics. You start to learn a little bit and you say, okay, now I know thermodynamics. I know it really well. You start to understand internal combustion engines, and then you're confident. Can somebody, Kanish, can you go on mute, please? It's
क्वेश्चन के
disturbing.
जब तुम पढ़ो क्वेश्चन के 2 के लगवा दूंगा.
All right, thank you so much. So as I was saying that when you sit through the first class, and I just took the example of thermodynamics, you start to say, oh, I know it all, and your confidence goes up. You sit through the second class, you learn a little bit more, your confidence goes up. And by the time you're in the fifth, sixth, or eighth class of thermodynamics, you say, yeah, I really know it well. I can tell you how the internal combustion engine works. I can tell you a two-valve, two-cylinder, four-valve, four-cylinder, all that thing which I learned, which I really don't remember all the time. As we start to learn something new, our confidence starts to get to a really high point, and that's called the peak of Mount Stupid. And why it's called the peak of Mount Stupid? Because actually you don't know a whole lot, but you think you know a whole lot. And this is the syndrome which everybody goes when they go through the learning. Once you get to a point where you say, oh, I know a lot, then you start to realize that, can the moderator mute everybody, please?
Pardon, sir?
I'm getting a lot of noise from one of the speakers. Can you just mute?
Okay, we'll just check, sir.
Yeah, all right, thank you so much.
I hope, sir, there's no noise now. We have muted all the participants.
Okay, all right. If you have, because I'm getting a noise, but that could be something called Kanishak Sharma, which continues to be a bothering noise. Yeah, all right, that's
We'll
fine.
just check, sir. We'll just
All right, no problem. So when you start to learn something, you get to the peak, which is called the peak of Mount Stupid, and then once you know more about a subject, then you realize how little do I know about it. So as you start to thereafter learn, which is gone to the point of inflection, after that you start to, the more you learn, the more you realize that how little do you know it. And this is typically called that the peak, the trough, or then you finally get to what's called the valley of despair. So this is a very strange phenomena. You learn more, your confidence goes up. It gets to a point and you say that, oh, I don't know enough. And your confidence actually goes down every time you learn more. So the more you learn, and this is typically most people get into their PhD students, I'm sure some of the professors here would have realized that the more you discover that, you realize that how little do you know about the subject. And then you get to the point of valley of despair, saying, I'm never going to get it right. And after that, you start to get into a slope of enlightenment, and you get to saying, yeah, it's now starting to make a point. And therefore, once you get to the real point, which is a plateau, which is saying, people believe that, trust me, it's complicated. So as you start to learn more, your confidence will go up, go down, go up. But keep in mind that if you are learning in the early stages, and if you think that you really know it all, try and be conscious that you might be going up the Mount Peak stupid. So this is something which is very important. And I can tell you that I've gone through this. I still think that I'm still sitting the valley of despair. I've not got to the slope of enlightenment, etc. I think some people have, Shakespeare has talked about it, Buddha has talked about it, but this is a real common phenomena in our human life. So as a student, I would like you to keep it in the back of your mind all the time, that the more you learn, the confidence will grow, but then you will realize that how little do you know. So the world is very complex, very complicated. There are lots and lots of things which you can learn. So don't build a false confidence that you know it all, because that may not be the reality of your world. I'll take you through another experiment. This is an experiment conducted a few hundred years ago, and somebody was asked to say that, can you go and measure how long is the coastline of England? So if you were to go and, so this is the picture of England, the old England. If you were to measure how long is this coastline, and again, maybe they didn't have the best engineers at that point in time, as today the university is producing. And they said, okay, if my yardstick, and that's where the yardstick comes from, if my yardstick is 200 kilometers, which means my unit of measure or least count, as they teach you in engineering colleges, if my least count is 200 kilometers, which means that I can't measure anything less than 200 kilometers. And if you were to use a 200 kilometer yardstick, the coastline of Britain comes to about 2,400 kilometers. Is that the right number? Possibly not. What if I actually reduced the size of my yardstick, which means that I reduce the least count of my measurement? And if I start to, instead of using a 100-kilometer yardstick, I use, instead of 200, I use a 100-kilometer yardstick, then the length of the same island, the same British island, becomes 2,800 kilometers. And if I reduced it even further, when I measure it with a 50-kilometer yardstick, the length comes to about 3,400 kilometers. Now, what is the real length of coastal England? It's very hard to measure. In fact, it's impossible to measure. And some of the professors will tell you that you could get different answers depending upon the lens you're applying. If you apply a details lens, you'll get a very different answer. If you apply a big picture lens, you'll get a very different answer. I asked you a question saying, are you a big picture guy or a detail guy? Keep in mind that both of you are right, but both of you will get to different answers. So when you look at things in detail, you get very different answers. When you look at a big picture, so the big picture might give you speed. This one might give you perfection and accuracy. These are the trade-offs which you'll have to always deal with. So what matters in life is not being either a detail side or on perfection side. What matters in life is to know when do you need to be a big picture and when do you need to be detailed, when speed matters and when perfection matters. Because if you start to fixate your mindset saying that I will always go for details or I'll always go for big picture, chances are that you will disappoint yourself, because life is very complicated. In fact, there's a Gregor Mendel which talks about that it's almost impossible to measure the coastline of any island given the fractals and some of those things. That's for another class when we talk about it, but that's the point. If you didn't believe, if you look at the stock market charts or when you look at sea waves, when you're sitting next to the sea waves, you find them very rough sea waves, but go up 4 meters and then you start to see it's very calm. So the details and big picture. So do you want to see the waves or do you want to see the sea? It's very different perspective, but you should know in what situation, what lens do you apply. Now, if you don't believe me, I'll just go to give another simple test. This is a world map. I'm sure you don't see it these days very often because you did it in your geography classes many years ago, or you now see it on the GPS or Google Maps or some of those applications which you use on your phone. Now, this is the world map. I've not tempered this world map at all. I've used this world map as it was. I was taught with this world map many, many years ago, and my daughter is being taught through this world map now. I've not made any changes, any tempering. Now, if I were to ask you, and I haven't put a Mentimeter to this, so you can use your chat window to write to me, is how big do you think Africa is compared to Greenland? And I'm sure you know this is Africa and this is Greenland. Tell me, how big is it? Is Africa and Greenland same size? Is Africa 1.5 times bigger? Or is Africa 2 times bigger? So I'm getting something 1.5 twice. Anand says 1.5. Some more people. What do you think is the right answer? Of course, you can Google, but that's not the intention I'm doing it. Just tell me, look at this map. This is the map which you've all been taught. And all our professors, at least my geography professor, taught me with this world map. Okay, I'm getting some more answers. And here is what you will see, 1.5, 2, okay, 1.5. All right, let me just tell you that if I were to put, let me bring them together and how it look like. So this is how they look like. Does anybody want to change their answers now? I've just picked up Greenland and put it closer to Africa in the same lens. But the reality is, if I actually looked at Greenland and fitted it into Africa, this is where it will fit in. And the reality is, if you were to do Google, you will figure out that Africa is 14 times bigger than Greenland. Now, what's going on here? I really want you to reflect and think about it. What's going on here? Why are all our professors cheating on us? Why is our education system so flawed all over the world, not just in India, not just in Rajasthan Technical University or somewhere? Why am I being fooled? Who's taking me for a ride? Why did somebody not tell me the real truth, that Greenland isn't that big? When I've actually been, so Radhesham Seni ji ne a calculation karke hame bataya that it's 14x bigger. That's right. So that's the area of 2.166 versus 30.37 million kilometers. Think about it. What's going wrong with our education system? Why am I teaching people? And when I look at my daughter's map book, which is what she has it here, I feel sad because we are being taught here. But let me tell you that it's not their complete fault. Of course, they're at fault. Of course, the education system got to change a little bit here and there. The real issue is that we are trying to depict a three-dimensional world on a two-dimensional paper. Now, I'm sure many of you are experts here. You do, you use the drafting and contouring way better than I ever did in my engineering classes. But the problem is that when you try to solve a three-dimensional problem and manifest it into a two-dimensional world, you will make distortions. And this is the result of a distortion. But the problem is that while everybody is making those distortions, nobody is writing a disclaimer beyond that world map saying that, this distortion has been made. And honestly, the distortion has been made by just, if you're interested in detail, because it's called the Cartesian projection. It's a projection by which you look at the world from top and then flatten it to the bottom. And as a result, anything which is in the northern hemisphere, the likes of Greenland, the likes of Canada and Russia, they become bigger. And anything which is on southern hemisphere, which is unfortunately Australia, unfortunately Africa, unfortunately South America, they start to look smaller than they actually are. Now, who decided to say that we should look at the world from the top? Why don't we look at the world from bottom? Because somebody said that the north is pointing upwards. But I don't think that when the Big Bang happened, they actually said that the world has to be looked north, up, down. So we make assumptions, we make approximation, we make distortions. So again, the point I'm trying to tell you that what you are studying today is not perfect and is not designed to be perfect. It'll have a different application, a different manifestation, and the world is becoming so complex. So I could have still lived with the same studies, the same pattern, the same skill set if I was living in March of 1983 when Queen's Gambit was only sold on bookshelves. But today, Queen's Gambit is not being sold on bookshelves. Of course, it's being sold on Amazon, Kindle, and all the formats, but it's being turned into a video series. And now, therefore, it's got the impact on chess.com and on the eBay and all of that. So the point I'm trying to say that keep your mindset much more broader. Do not get fixated. Don't think that what you see is what you get. It's not. What you see is what you don't get. You got to test. And again, I go back to saying that if you got a 200-kilometer yardstick, you'll get Britain as 2,400 kilometers. If you got a 50-kilometer yardstick, you'll get a 3,400. The gap is not, the Britain hasn't changed. It's about your mindset. It's about your perspective. How do you see things? And that's really important. Let's get into a little bit of details of what's the real difference between having good skill set and having a growth mindset. They're two different things. All right. Before I take you there, I want to say sorry to you. And I want to say sorry because you may not be built to succeed. It is unfortunately, and it's nothing to do with the university which you're studying in, it's nothing to do with the education system which you're part of. It is unfortunately the makeup of this entire society and the education system which we get through is that we may not be built to succeed, especially when I talk about the corporate world. I'm sure you may be built to succeed in many other world, but in the corporate world, the mindset required is very different compared to what the mindset creation which may happen through our early growing years. The day you walked into your nursery grade, the day you walked into your primary school, the day you walked into your secondary, in those cases, there's a lot of things which are being worked on our mindset, which may be twisting, which may be turning what we have. So let me start with that apologies before I get into what I know. So the first thing is everything in life, and I told you again, I asked you those 6 questions: speed versus perfection, details versus big picture. Everything is about trade off. Now, before I talk about the trade off you're going to make today, let me tell you the trade offs our ancestors made. And when I'm talking about our ancestors, I'm not talking about your mother or your father or your grandmother or grandfather or great grandfather. I'm talking about several stages great grandfathers. And typically it's assumed that the chimpanzees were the early human. So I'm going to give you a little bit difference between the chimpanzees and humans. So what humans did, humans actually did a great trade-off that we wanted to have superior language capability. And when we had to build language, what we had to lose is memory. Now, this is, of course, scientific research. I definitely don't, I'm not the expert on it. I've read about it, but this I'm going to tell you. So chimpanzees were great at remembering things. They could learn, they could memorize whatever they could. But we could have remained chimpanzees if we only focused on having great memory. And we said, okay, no, I want to have great language. I want to communicate. I want to talk. And as a result, that space of the mind got developed to have superior language capability, but we lost a part of our memory capability. Don't believe me? I'll give you some highlights. Of course, reminded me of Nida Fazli, a great poet, who said that "Kabhi kisi ko mukammal jahan nahi milta," no one ever gets the universe. So let me tell you that if our great grandfathers like chimpanzees made the choices you will have to make will be very important. So you cannot, I go back to my point about fear of missing out. You will have to miss out certain things to make something better. You can't do everything. Nobody can get everything and nobody can be perfect. And therefore, you got to choose what kind of mindset you build. So this is the story on the cognitive trade-off hypothesis, which basically says that as you start to develop higher and higher performances, you try to reduce the noise into the system, you get into typically the high efficiency or high robustness areas. Moderator, can you please mute everybody? Okay, I'll go quick fast in the interest of time. So basically, when we moved away from being chimpanzees, we made certain trade-off. We built some capability which are much stronger and lost some of the capability. If you don't believe me, watch this interesting game, and you want to watch. There's a YouTube video on this one called Minefield, and in that they will tell you that chimpanzees can actually beat humans in the game of memory. So if you were to play a game of memory with chimpanzees, you will lose for sure, because they have the ability to memorize a lot more than what we have. But what they don't have is that they don't have the ability of the language which we as humans have developed. So if chimpanzees had to do trade-off, you'll have to do trade-off of what you want to do in your own life. So the first one I want to talk about is, are you an individual excellence guy or are you a collective success guy? And unfortunately, the education system, and I'm not talking about this here, but the entire education system actually forces us to be more around individual excellence. It's about, are you a class topper? Are you doing better than your competitor? Everybody in the class competes with one another. And I know some of these classes start to become more collegiate. Some of them start to do group subjects, and some of them start to do some assignments. But let me tell you that the education system by far is focused on individual excellence. And I'm not suggesting we change that, not at all. But all I'm suggesting that you should know that you are being trained to be individually excellent. But in the corporate world, if there's one thing which is hated the most, is individual brilliance. What you need is collective success, because you can't have, you're working in a company of 2,000 people and five of them are outstanding and the remaining are not. That can happen only in a classroom. In a world of corporate, everybody is either a hero or nobody is a hero. So this is going to be a big shift you will have to make. And therefore, I always encourage that if you are an individual excellence guy, you will have a tougher time. Typically, and unfortunately, I did very well in my schools. I realized that was a big limitation. So being a topper of the class is a bad idea. I'm not suggesting that you don't be the topper of the class, but I think being only obsessed, being that I am the best and nobody else, or being better at the expense of somebody else, is a bad idea when it comes to corporate world. So individual success is important. You got to learn individually at some point, but collectively and building together. So if you haven't started to do build teamwork, if you don't already play a sport, a sport will make you a better team player. I have this regret. I never played a team sport, and that's something which comes to hurt you. So either get to a team sport or start to become a team learner. When you learn together, you're likely to get better mindset. If you, this is a quote which I borrowed from Albert Einstein, which says that, I have no special talent. Of course, he's lying. He did. I'm only passionately curious. And I'm going to pick up these two words, which is passionate and curious. Both of them. Moderator, can you please? This is a bit of noise. I think I'm getting distracted. The speaker says Radhe
So
Sham
just
Seni.
can you please identify somebody?
It says Radhe Sham Seni.
Okay, sir. We'll just check. Radhesham, sir.
Okay. All right.
Yes, sir. We
Okay.
have checked.
Lovely. Good. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I'm going to pick on these two words, which is passionate and curious. Let me tell you one of the interesting interviews I watched, that of Jeff Bezos. Some of you who order from Amazon would know Jeff Bezos is nobody who created Amazon. And what for Jeff important? He says that most of us are gifted with something. Somebody might be gifted to be a great musician. Somebody might be gifted to be good at mathematics. Somebody might be gifted to be a good artist. But if we continue to just keep our gift, we are actually doing disservice to you. How do you take your gift and make it your passion is a differentiation. So if you're good at mathematics, don't leave it there. Take it to the level of depth you can get to. If you are a good artist, become the best sketch artist, become the best painter, become. And I'm not saying that this because these are the right things to say. Of course, I'm not suggesting that people who are an engineering graduates will start to become fashion models. That's what I'm suggesting. But are you really, really, really the expert in one thing where you can be beaten by nobody? Because in the real life, in the corporate world, especially in the consulting world, we need what is called the T-shaped people. A T-shaped person is very little depth in every subject, but very deep depth in one subject. So you like a T. You're very wide, inch deep, but you're very deep, a mile deep in one subject area. So how do you become a T? Which means that you know everything a little bit, but you know one thing really well, is when you pursue your passion. So if you have a passion on any of the subjects, it could be about, maybe chemistry, it could be about, you could become a material sciences expert. It could be about human resources. You could become an HR expert, but be expert and live your passion. I'm going to run fast in the interest of time. I do want to talk about this is a real person. Okay, I went to an engineering college like yours, and I had our professor Mathur. Okay, somebody says you're disturbing the session. Is it for me? Okay, all right. So this is a real story. This is many years ago, almost 2 decades ago. We had a Professor Mathur, and Professor Mathur believed in one thing. He said that, I can really create the great thing out of you. By the way, Professor Mathur also did tuition, which I didn't like, which I never attended. So the mantra Professor Mathur had is saying, to ace in the exam. Yes, Meenal. Okay. All right. So the mantra Professor Mathur had is that, when you got a question paper, you got certain choices to make. Like I'm talking today that you got certain choices to make. So instead of attempting to do all the questions, can you attempt few questions? So if there are 15 chapters in the book, just focus on 11 of those, because anyway you got to do 5 out of 7 questions. There are some questions, even if you don't attempt, you are good. And the past year pattern for several years suggests that if you studied from chapter number 1 to 11 and ignored from 12 to 15 or 12 to 16, you're still good. You'll possibly get more marks by studying less than you'll get by studying everything. Because if you study everything, you got to make choices. And then you say, okay, I know these 5 questions better, but I know the 6th one also. Because the examination pattern is saying that you got to pick 5 out of those 7. And Professor Mathur taught us how to ace the exam. And I think many of us aced the exam. But as a result, what many of us did, we actually never looked at 1/3 of the book, because that 1/3 of the book was not meant to pass the exam. And actually, many of us did flying colors because we just focused on 5 out of 7. Now, that could be okay for an engineering student because I studied a different kind of engineering. And fortunately, I'm not building bridges or buildings and I'm not doing any of it. So I can't be responsible for killing innocent people because I'm not applying my engineering building skills here. But I'm applying my engineering fundamental skills here. I learned first principles. I learned the basic problem solving using engineering. But if I were taught that way, I think I will fail. Imagine you have a serious illness and you go to the doctor, and the doctor happens to be a trained medical professional, and the only thing you realize that that doctor, in order to pass exams, only studied 5 out of 7. Would you like to be treated by a doctor who only got 45% marks because that was good enough to pass? So it is very important for us to understand that if I'm sure all of you are focused on getting good grades because that's how you get good placements, but don't read selectively, because if you read selectively, you don't even know what you're missing. So I luckily had Professor Mathur. I hope you don't, but that's an important story I want to tell you. One thing which I will tell you, that talent is overrated. A lot of you believe that X person is smarter, Y is not. I'm good, you're not. I'm so bad, this person. Enough amount of research has taught us that talent is overrated. You will find a lot of people who studied something and didn't get anywhere, and a lot of people who didn't study anything but got. So the guy, and I'll talk about some of my friendlier examples. So the guy who built one of the largest Citibank operations in India actually was a second division guy, and he's a good friend of mine. And he says that the only thing he was good at was football. Because he was so good at football, he could get people together. I'm not suggesting that you aim for second grade. Okay, you should aim for first grade and many other things and all that. But don't get that this particular talent is overrated, because talent is, and especially when it comes to some of these engineering talents or medical or management talent we are learning, they will change. Honestly, I went to engineering college 25 years ago, and half of those things are not relevant anymore. So we should start to build saying, do you have the ability to learn? Because the world will change. So what I learned, I went to learn, again, it talk about a little bit. I learned Fortran 77 in my college. The Fortran 77 is no longer relevant today. So my expertise on that is useless at best. So you have to look at, there is enough experiment and studies which have been done so that hard work, grit, commitment will surpass strong talent. So somebody is super hardworking versus somebody is talented. I'm telling you, in the long run, hard work will win over talent, because the world of today is changing faster. So somebody who is talented for today's world is no longer going to be talented for the next world. I'm not suggesting that you don't focus on your studies, but I'm suggesting that you focus on hard work. You focus on your attitude. That will get you much faster. There are many examples. Some of you might have picked up. Airtel is hiring the new CIO today. In fact, they just announced it in the press 2 days ago. Now, if you go and look at the LinkedIn profile of that person is not even a BTech undergrad. That person is Bachelor of Arts. And that person has great capabilities compared to many people who went to an engineering college. And that person is going to head entire Airtel's global product engineering, technology engineering capability. So I don't buy that what you learn, what you gain today is going to lead you. But this person, if you look at while, he has been a continuous learner. So after he finished his school, he went to work for a company where he learned a completely new skill. From there on, if you look at his learning track record, he's acquired one skill or another every couple of years. And that gets you. So learning just once is no longer enough. I'm going to go fast now in the interest of time. A lot of people know a lot, but in corporate world, it's not about who knows the most. It's about who articulates the best. I know sometimes our engineering colleges don't spend too much time, and they shouldn't spend too much time, but in your separate time, in your free time, if there's one skill which I would like you to acquire, and I'm moving away from mindset now to a little bit of skill set, is the power of storytelling. Now, storytelling used to be a negative word many years ago, but it's now the right thing. So the ability to communicate your point of view is very important. I struggled with this limitation for many years. I wasn't a good communicator. And I realized that, how hard can it be when you know it all, but you can't communicate the best. So try and learn, and it's one of the easiest signs to learn. How do you communicate? There are many books which have been written on it. There's some of my favorite books like Barbara Minto and some of the other ones which talk about the pyramid principle. But communication is a very powerful language. If you can't communicate, even if you know everything, it is useless. So in the corporate world, those who know the most don't succeed, but those who can communicate, articulate point of view, that is one of the better skills. So take a side course. There are enough courses available these days on Coursera and some of these other platforms like Udemy. My strong suggestion would be that learn to communicate, because that is far more important than just the knowledge you acquire. Another interesting perspective on mindset, there are two ways you can solve a problem. What's called the Aristotle way or the Sherlock ways. So the Aristotle way is that you start with the theory, build that theory into a hypothesis, build that into an observation, and you either confirm, which means prove the hypothesis, or disprove the hypothesis. This is what is the deduction kind of thing. And then, of course, there's an induction theory, which says you start with an observation, look at a pattern, build a hypothesis, that's your theory. Both are right. Both are effective in different circumstances. One is called analysis, the other is called synthesis. Analysis is breaking things down, synthesis is bringing things together. I don't talk much about it, but there's an interesting book on this, which is the design thinking. There are many other authors which we kind of talked about it. Acquire that book and start to read a little bit about it, because this book helps you not in building a skill set, but building a mindset. Are you an inductive person or are you a deductive person? There are two different ways. There are different ways you'll solve a problem using analytical tools. There are different ways you'll solve a problem using synthesis tools. Both of them are important, but I wanted to give you the perspective that you got to choose which one works in a which situation. Another thing which I want to talk to you about is from mindset perspective, that once you leave your studies and start to work either on your own, these days many of you start on your own, you become entrepreneurs, or you start to work for a corporate, you will no longer just be you, because you're not talking about what you are, but you'll be talking about what a brand you are. So today I'm here, I'm talking about not as me, but I think I represent also the brand which I'm part of, the company which I work for. I'll give you one very interesting experiment, and you may find it interesting to hear the results of that experiment. In that experiment, there are a group of people who go to a restaurant. And when they go to a restaurant, they are greeted by a very rude waiter. Okay, so this restaurant is like a setup, it's an experiment. And the person who's serving you is very rude. She or he doesn't take your order properly, she misses certain things and all of that. And then at the end, when the check comes, or the bill which you get of what you've eaten, the restaurant, as part of the experiment, knowingly charges you less. Okay, so the experiment is that you walk into a restaurant which is set up, and you have a rude waiter, and she doesn't treat you properly. But when she brings a bill, instead of this being 2,000 rupees, she charges you 1,500 rupees. What are the chances that you will actually tell that waiter, saying, you made a mistake. You should have been charging us for 2,000, but you charge us for 1,500. In the same experiment, another restaurant where you're greeted by one of the best service person in the world. So she treats you very well. She takes your order. She's asking you how you like the food, etc., etc. And then she makes the same mistake, that instead of charging 2,000, she presents a bill of 1,500 to you. Now imagine you're the same person. You go to restaurant one day and go to restaurant two the other day. What are the chances that you will tell restaurant one, a rude waiter, saying that they have undercharged you, or the second person was, the nice waiter, and she's undercharged? More often than not, people don't tell the rude waiter, and they actually pay less and say she deserved it, and they walk out. Whereas in the second experiment, which is where you got a nice waiter, and you actually tell, saying, oh, you made a mistake, you should be charging 2,000 rupees. Now, in both these situations, you should know that the waiter doesn't own the restaurant. The restaurant is owned by somebody else. The waiter is just simply an agent of that brand. Now, the behavior of that agent actually has an impact on the brand. So, in the first experiment, the hotel will lose money and possibly will be out of business if they have bad waiters. And the other one, the hotel will possibly make more money and the restaurant will thrive because they have good waiters. I'm not suggesting that either of us are waiters here, but all of us are agents in big businesses. So we are part of a big entrepreneur. Big. In fact, today you represent the institution which you're part of. So it's very important that our mindset, and here I gave you this example of a waiter serving rudely or serving nicely, is just an example of mindset. If you have the mindset to grow, you will grow. If you have mindset to be fixed, you will not grow. So it's important that you no longer, right now, you are who you are. So if you do well in studies, you get great marks. If you do poorly in studies, you get poor marks. But once you're out of it, you're no longer you. You are representing a big brand, a big company, your own institute. So for that institute, you got to change your mindset compared to, because the consequences are not on you, the consequences are on somebody else. What does the future look like? I'm going to try and attempt. This is nothing which we all know for sure. But this is the kind of trends which you're seeing. And I did not pick up a global chart. I picked up an India chart, which is a little bit old chart here, which talks about saying, starting since 1983, what are the kind of jobs which are actually declining and what are the kind of jobs which are going up? So clearly, as you can see, that the routine, manual, and non-routine kind of jobs which are manual are all declining. But what is going up is analytical jobs, the cognitive jobs, and what is going to be even called out as routine cognitive. But cognitive is very important. So cognitive, as you can say, is a cerebral or the mind game. If all the jobs in tomorrow's world are not about fixing an electrical connection, the jobs tomorrow are not just building mindlessly, if it's all about cognitive, because machines will take over to do many other things which we as a human do today. It is very important for you to have skill set, but not stop there. In this session today, I'm not talking about saying that you trade mindset for skill set. You have the skill set, but build on mindset. And I gave you the example that you'll have to do certain trade-offs. So you'll have to give up certain skills to acquire some of these mindset capabilities. This is my favorite chart, which again says that, sometimes you can be too busy. Many people come and tell me saying, I've got no time because I'm super busy. And that's why you can see that, you can't adapt. The world of digital technology, which you see through this chart, is growing much faster than our ability as a human. Institutions adapt slowest, companies adopt even faster, and individuals adopt fastest. But despite the best adaptable capability of the individual, the digital technology is growing the fastest. So you're creating this technology debt. You are not going to be able to catch up with you. As much as the institution likes to teach you the best, they will not be able to teach you the best because the world is changing much faster. So it's your ability. How do you align? And again, you can't learn everything. I told you that you got to make certain choices. So the technological debt will continue to increase. It's up to you as to how fast and how quickly you can adapt. So I want to leave you with this simple slide at the end, which basically says that, at a personal level, you got to decide. There are lots and lots and lots of choices you have to make. You have to make certain choices for yourself. The second thing I will say is that you got to think big. It's not about what's written in the book or what you know. Imagination, what is the art of possible is really great. I feel lucky that you are born in this time. I was born in a different time, but you are born in possibly the best time, and you have got the ability. The amount of entrepreneurship opportunities, what you can do on your own, are possibly great today. I also want to address to some people, and I know I've lived through some of those professors who say that the quality of students changes over time. But I can tell you the quality of students today is better than what it was at my time. And I want to be very, very, very strong about it, that all of you in the class today are smarter than all of us in the class when I was 25 years ago. If some of you don't believe it, so if you are a professor listening to me and say, you don't believe it, I want you to do a simple thought experiment. Think of it in your mind if you have kids. Don't you think that your daughter or your son is a little bit smarter than you are? Of course, they're not smarter compared to today, but imagine a 15-year-old daughter of yours or a 10-year-old son of yours today is smarter than 10-year-old you or 15-year-old you. The world of technology is becoming smarter. The world of human engineering is also becoming smarter. We are evolving. So today's generation is definitely, I don't like people saying, the older generation was smarter. It wasn't. The next generation is definitely smarter than us. And you have the ability to also imagine and dream big. And the last thing I want to say is that don't be an individualistic. Go together. I know the exams will ask you, you can't, I'm not suggesting that you go together and cheat in the exam, but if you're doing projects, if you're doing programs, if you're doing learning, learn it together because you will go not faster, but farther. Before I end, I want to tell you this called the cargo cult science. This is a small island somewhere in Far East, wherein these are the guys who actually saw an aeroplane in late 40s. This is the time when World War II was in progress, and during the World War II, the planes were not able to fly direct from India to Australia, and they used to take a pit stop to fill in the fuel. So this island was used as a filling station, and the planes used to come, land, and go. And this is the kind of the clan there which used to watch these planes. And every time the plane came, because these the people who were fighting the wars, they did not want the tribal people to mess with them. So what they used to do, they used to bring food for them. So every time a plane landed, the tribal people got food so that they could be taken care of. Now, this has been about 60, 70 years since that happened, maybe 80 years now. And these people have not been seeing the planes coming. And they thought that the planes were that of the birds of God. And they said that now there is famine, we are not getting enough food because God is angry with us. So what they've tried to do is that because they have what they had as a mindset, so they have built their own birds, as they call it. They've built their own plane. This is actually a real South Seas cult. It's called the cargo cult science, where they actually have built planes. They look like the planes which they saw in World War II. They built it with the best capabilities which they had. They have also built their ATC. So they've got people which got that wooden headset, and they pray every day, morning, evening, night, to say, God, please send those birds, and we need food. So if you want to learn only by seeing what others are doing, I think you will likely fail. Unless you change the mindset, unless you know what the plane does and how a plane flies, you might land up with some of that. I'm sure you won't. But with that, let me bring it to the end, saying your mindset is everything. It's not just about skill set. Your mindset matters. So I'll take a pause here. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I know we are short on time, but if there are questions, we can take for the next 10 minutes or so.
Okay, if participants have any queries, they can type them in the chat box. Yes, there were participants in the beginning also who had some queries. So you can type your queries in the chat box. You can raise your question. You can, now we have unmuted you. If anybody has any queries. Yes, participants.
Okay, there's a question from Anand. How to know when you get to the Mount Stupid point? Good question, Anand. It's a hard one to determine, but once you start to get to saying, I don't know enough, which is like your turning point to the inflection, saying, oh, when you start to encounter a situation which you haven't encountered before, is something. So once you know that you got to a point where you think you know everything, but you actually fail. So typically, the first big failure is a good point to determine that you got to the Mount Stupid. But my suggestion would be that don't wait to ride the Mount Stupid. The sooner you know that you're on Mount Stupid. So I always say that I always start a new journey saying I'm already on Mount Stupid. So don't let your confidence turn into an overconfidence. That's my suggestion. I've been on that many times. So failures teach you the most, and it's good to fail, but it's important to fail fast. So don't wait for a big failure to come and hurt you. But continue to experiment. In today's world, you will fail. In fact, those who say that they don't fail are actually either lying or not doing enough, because there's no way everybody will be perfect. I visited a hospital where they said that, I asked them, saying, what is your defect rate? They said our defect rate is 0. I can only find out two things from this. One, either they don't know how to measure defect, or two, their staff is being trained to hide defect. Both of them are bad things for me. So when somebody says that we are perfect, and I heard many of you were perfectionists, it's actually generally a bad sign. Okay, Kritika has a point. Can you please clear the point on how speed is more important than perfection? All right. As I said that, there are trade-offs. So there is never a perfect answer all the time. So I'm not suggesting that speed is always more important than perfection. There will be a situation when speed will be less important than perfection. So if you're building a life-saving device, you can't be building on speed. You got to be building on perfection. So there are situations for which you take something. The reason I made that point is because I found a big skew that about 95% of you were tilted towards perfection and only 5% towards speed. The reason I say that speed is actually becoming far more important in today's world or not, because look at the agility with which the world is changing and the speed with which things can be copied. Let me ask a simple question. I know some of you must have studied engineering. How long do you think it took to invent compass? Okay, the compass, which was the original very old navigation device, which the ancestors used to use in the seas to travel from one part to another. How long do you think it took for compass to get built? Any guesses in the chat box? Okay, I can tell you compass took almost 100 years to build. It took 100 years from the time the first compass model was built to the finally we start to see a compass which we see today. Because there were many experiments, many this thing, people didn't know. So what you're doing in, let's say, Europe would not be known to people in Asia. The world was separated and all that. Today, if you were to build one new compass, a compass-like kind of thing, by the time you build and somebody else will copy it, it might be a matter of days, if not hours. So the speed with which your invention or innovation can actually be beaten is very high. So the amount of time, how much time did Steve Jobs had as a competitive advantage on an iPhone? I'm sure many of you were not dealing with iPhones at that time, but I was. iPhone was the first big device where it went with a buttonless phone. In the past we used to have QWERTY phones, we used to have big keyboard on phone, and he says, why do you need a keyboard on the phone? And he killed the keyboard, and he had a full touchscreen phone. Now, from the time he built it versus when the Nokias of this world and all started to come, few months. So in today's world, if you only continue to be perfection, now, can somebody tell me that is iPhone a perfect phone? Absolutely not. By the way, I don't like iPhone personally, but any phone is not perfect. But if I keep holding on saying I'm not going to release the iPhone 11 or iPhone 12 just because it's not perfect, that's a bad idea. So speed is more important in today's world in many areas. Of course, when you're dealing with, as I said, that life critical things, it's very important to deal with perfection. But progress is more important than perfection is what my point. But again, it depends on the situation. Okay, there are more questions. Let me just pick from the chat. I'm trying to pick here. Okay, there's a question which comes from Rishikesh. Says, what if you want to change the career field? For example, suppose one has been placed as a software engineer now, but want to choose some other field like web designing, development, digital marketing. How should one approach that decision? Okay, good question, Rishikesh. There are two ways you could look at it. One is that you already are working in it, or another is that you still have it in your mind. So I don't know, the question is that you already have been working as a software developer and want to change. So let me deal with that scenario. When you're already working for a company, let's say a TCS or a Wipro, something as a software developer, and now want to get into web designing and some of those areas. Now, assume that you want to work in the same company. The choices are many because these days most companies have career rotation kind of plans. All you need to do is that you need to demonstrate that you have the ability to get into that area. And it's important for you to change. Just to give my personal example, I've been now in KPMG for 23 years. I haven't done anything for more than 4 years. 4 years is my longest I've done one role. I've done about 7 or 8 different roles. So if you have the ability to kind of move into different areas, you got to do a little bit of self-study. You got to build, because no organization will invest on you because of your hobby or your passion. You got to invest in you because of your hobby or passion. So most corporations are willing for you to change. If you have to change, change faster, because don't get into a field and stay then say, I'll try next year. If you decided to change faster. The second scenario of your question saying, if you haven't yet joined, let's say this Infosys or TCS or whatever you're doing, you in your mind are a software developer, and all the life which you spend is thinking that I'll become a software programmer and all that. And now I want to get into, let's say, design thinking or UI UX or some of those areas. Then I think it's even important at that point in time for you to undertake certain courses. Good news these days that there are many of these courses that are available open. I know that and the entire MIT courseware is open to the whole world. Forget about that, even many of them are available. So I would say first, acquire some basic knowledge. Second, build your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn is a very powerful tool these days to land the best job which you want. So create that, and there are many people who I also hire from LinkedIn, because you got to see some people who have a differentiated capability compared to others. So build your knowledge in that particular area. Most of these areas which you're talking about are easily available online. Build your public profile and then apply for where you think is the right organization. I think in today's world, changing career field is actually encouraged. Companies don't like people who are doing only one kinds of things all the time. Okay, I'm just picking up another question in the interest of time. About 2 minutes to go. Yeah, I think I've covered. Okay, so back to you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. This information is for the participants. The feedback link has been shared. You can fill the form accordingly with the help of the feedback link. Now, as we come to this highly inspirational and interactive session, to make it a memorable experience, I request all the dignitaries and participants to please switch on their cameras so that we can take a group photograph.
Please, all of you, switch on your videos for a group photograph.
I request more participants to please switch on their cameras. Please switch on your cameras so that we can take a group photograph. All the participants, please switch on your cameras. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our guest speaker today, Mr. Akhilesh Tuteja, for this highly motivational session. As has been rightly said, that technology knows no bounds, and his valuable guidance has surely opened new avenues of learning for all the participants. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us. I would also like to thank Professor Arya Gupta, Honorable Vice Chancellor, RTU Kota, for his extensive support. Professor Hiren Mathur, Coordinator, TQIP 3, RTU Kota. Dr. Lata Gidwani, RTU Expert Lecture Coordinator, Kota. Dr. Bhagwan Gidwani, who has been here for his valuable support. And once again, I would like to thank Mr. Akhilesh Tuteja for sparing his precious time for guiding and motivating all in this session. Thank you so much, sir. Now,
Thank you,
we
sir.
can
Thank you.
conclude this meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now we can end this meeting. Thank you all.